to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
How are you starting out?
All right, we'll start off with the approval of minutes. I've read them and reviewed them and recommend an approval.
I move that we approve the minutes as drafted and reviewed.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous. First one is a small project, NACC 177 to 24th Street.
So this is just request for approval of a water line. There's some photos that Heidi did. I don't know if anyone's present for the water line. Are you the owner? Yeah. So the owner is present, and it's just the wetlands across the street, and it's going to be a one-day trench across the front yard. So no need for erosion control or anything. Just.
Do you have any questions?
No question.
Jeff?
Did you receive a complete submittal of information for this?
We did.
No more questions.
Joe?
Just, even on a small project, we can come up with some sort of BMP for dewatering should they need it.
No one's dewatering anything at this time of year. He's actually here because I think this
His
well
well's
is
dry.
dry.
Really?
It's
So the table's that deep, all right.
I don't.
Yep.
I haven't seen water, and we've been augering all over the place. I haven't
Everything's
seen
dry
water in
well.
weeks,
Fine, I'm all set.
months.
Motion?
Do you have any conditions? In
Just
mind?
post-construction inspection when it's stabilized.
Okay, small project. What
L.
type?
L.
Type L. I move that we consider this small project NACC 177 type L.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, that's unanimous.
And I also move that we approve small project NACC 177 as type L as presented with pre and post,
Just post.
just post condition inspection.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous. Well said, thank you.
Thank you. We'll get that out in the mail tomorrow.
Next one is IDA for 64 Empire Drive.
There's already water in the street and a hookup. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
we're just saying others who don't have an alternative.
There is no water.
Oh, really? Wow.
Just go deeper or frack it.
Not good. So next is 64 Empire Drive.
Yes.
You can come up and they might have some questions.
Did you just want me to sit here?
Sure. Thanks. You can just say who you are for the record.
Oh, sure. My name is Rama Ati. I'm Hari Wasaf's wife.
Okay. And the proposal is to enclose the deck as a sunroom. This was permitted as a 40B. Both the subdivision itself and the house have a certificate of compliance. I was out. You can see the photos. Everything looks just as it was the day it was permitted. So it would just be enclosing the deck. I think they're doing it all on the same footings and
correct.
footprint. They're not removing anything. The only thing that wasn't proposed that's sort of typical on these is to put it, once they've enclosed them, is to put kind of a stone drip trench around that perimeter for the stormwater. That wasn't previously a problem, but will be once they put a roof on it. Do you know what that is?
I don't know what that is.
So like a crushed stone edge along the outside on the ground.
Sure.
So when the water comes off the roof, it kind of goes, instead of eroding the dirt or the grass, it'll go into the stone.
Okay.
Your contractor, I'm sure, when he reads the permit, will understand
Absolutely.
what's being asked for.
So Jen, you'll put that into the order?
It would be a condition, yeah.
Good, thank you.
So they don't need erosion control. There's that retaining wall that would keep any, if they're not even digging, so it's really just enclosing. But whatever debris or whatever isn't going to be, the retaining wall is quite a ways down.
If you say drip edge, do you mean just putting stone on top of the lawn, or would they dig out some of the lawn?
No, they would have to dig out,
some of the lawn.
what, a minimum
6 inches?
6 inch?
Yeah.
Is this a development right next to National Grid?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that a stormwater structure that's beyond the retaining wall?
No, that's the wetland on the property.
Oh, it
They
is.
crossed it with a common driveway to access 3 homes with porous pavement,
Got it.
if you remember that.
Yeah, I do.
6 and 7, about 6 and 7.
No, it was 13, 14, and 15.
15.
Coming in,
You guys-
They're on the right,
On the
yeah.
right,
The
yeah.
numbering started on the left.
yep.
I know the area well. My son was-
Yes, I know. That's why you know it so well. Hello.
Any questions, Deb?
No questions.
Joe?
No.
Jeff, I'm sorry. Joe?
No questions, but are we looking for a negative with,
Negative number 3 with
Okay.
conditions for the drip trench and did I say pre and post or just post? Yeah, because there's no erosion control, so there's no need for pre.
yep, I'll set them, no questions.
Doug? No questions. Motion?
I move that we grant a -3 determination for the project proposed on 64 Empire Drive with conditions for post-construction inspection and the perimeter drip trench around the proposed addition.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that's unanimous. All set?
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Next one is 50 Stanton Drive. Stanton Way.
Okay, East Stanton Way. Do the same? Here's a photo of 50 Stanton. And let me get back to
Ken, is it easy if we just keep all the photos together and hand to you at the end? and
Sure.
send it past them
Or
all?
Deb can, I only need one setback for
All
the
right, all
file,
right.
so it doesn't matter if one ends up down there.
I have, but they've collected them from there.
So here's the as-built plan for 50 Stanton Way. It's an existing deck, which they would like. Why are the photos not casting? It's kind of weird.
I like that
It
one.
looks like that.
I love
Great.
that one.
Yeah, there's-
Can we make
that's
that?
just
That guy
that.
wanted that to happen.
So I have to stop and open each one, and I'm not sure why.
That'd be an
But you can see
interesting
the-
application.
The deck, since we have no coastal. There we go. So this is an existing deck. The little hatched area with the extension is, it's kind of,
Did it scan that way, or is that?
yeah, it's
fuzzy.
much clearer on mine than it is here. I
Yeah.
don't know what's going on tonight, but for whatever reason. But to the end of the word deck is the extension. So they're not going toward the wetland, they're going toward the back of the lot.
Okay.
And then you're going to enclose the whole thing, right?
Yep.
And this is more like a screen room,
Screen and porch, yeah.
screen and porch, not the, but for the extension, they do need 3 new footings. But they are still outside of the 50-foot no-build zone. And they have proposed the drip edge already.
Okay.
The only thing I would recommend is just maybe putting some erosion control when they're digging the new footing so they don't wash any soil or anything, or just keep the soil close to the house. So that was my only. And you're the owner, correct?
Yes.
Do you have any questions?
No questions.
Jeff?
What type of footings are proposed?
I'm not a builder, so I don't know.
3 new sonotubes.
Sonotube
Yeah.
type? Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
It's in the proposal. I don't know how much of it Don printed, but they have pretty detailed,
I don't have it here.
No.
Okay, sonotubes, that's all I'm asking.
How much larger is it then going to be from what it is now?
It's 4 feet further off the house, same coverage across the back, just slightly deeper off the house.
Okay, thank you. Jeff, Joe?
No questions.
There you go.
Motion?
this would also be a negative number 3. with pre and post, just pre, so to make sure they install some sort of erosion control, just a silt sock or something, and post-construction when they're done.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next one is CANRAD for 242 no DEP file number yet on Hawthorne.
No DEP file number on
44
Hawthorne,
Hawthorne Place.
unfortunately. We checked today. Did you check again?
I checked, yeah. They're pretty slow on issuing.
That's what I've heard.
The tax dollars at work.
So it's, I don't know, what this isn't the way this usually works. It usually casts whatever I open and close, but now I have to keep stopping and starting, so. I just want to make sure I get the right Hawthorne, because you sent me the revised plan. Oh, and here we are at Hawthorne. Looks a lot like Italy or
It's Hawthorne
Venice,
on
I
Venice.
think.
That's the right one.
Yeah. Can do better than that. And I didn't really take any pictures. The wetland is not much to look at. The only thing I did want to show you is, since some of you were, I'm sure, here at the time, there is a prior delineation. Here's a photo of it. That's just the brush pile. There is a prior delineation of this property where the home is 100% in the 100-foot buffer zone, which would normally be a little bit of cause for concern, but having been out there with Mike and digging a lot of holes, you know, we saw what we saw, and the truth is, it's not, if it was wet before, it isn't wet now. And maybe it wasn't wet before.
And again, you're not talking hydrology, you're talking by definition.
The whole thing is almost entirely Japanese knotweed, so there's no indicator species out there. Every once in a while, we saw a sensitive fern.
Yeah.
But that was about it for wetland plants. Maybe a little red maple and river birch. But
So what you're saying is that disregard any prior delineations by whatever action we take tonight.
yeah.
Yeah, that was done in '96. It's possible it was done before soils came in, because we looked at the soils pretty thoroughly.
So when people say, I'm as old as dirt, and I'm here before the soils rules change, that makes it accurate?
Possibly.
I mean, if the knotweed wasn't out there previously and it was just river birch and red maple, maybe someone
Yeah,
just looked at the
just
overstory and called it wet.
Okay,
Right.
I know it's
But I mean, even looking at the aerials for the 90s, that roadway was in there. You said it was some kind of,
Was a loam pit.
that explains the big piles.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
There's some
There's
big
still a
piles.
loam pile at the end of the
At the-
hammerhead.
Yeah, they used
Yeah.
to screen loam out of there
Oh.
and truck it all over town.
Huh.
Fine thing.
Ken Bailey.
Yeah.
No, Ken-
This is off of Waverly.
Off of Waverly.
Oh, God, yeah. Sure.
He used to have his garage on Knowledge.
Yeah, over the river.
Yeah. Any questions, Doug?
No questions.
Doug? I mean, Jack? All over the place.
I know. None. Thank you.
Joe?
I'm all set.
Doug, also? Motion?
So we can't do a
Oh, we can't.
motion because we don't have a DEP file number, but if you're all set, we can maybe at least let Mr. Seecamp know that he doesn't need to attend the next
Yeah.
meeting.
Conditional approval.
Conditional
Yeah.
approval, and did you let the applicant know they should probably clean up that little brush pile?
Yeah.
And so I'll write a little
will.
note about that in the
Okay.
decision, but other than that, I think it would just be to approve the line as proposed.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
This one's going
Motion to continue?
Yeah, we need a motion.
Motion to continue.
So moved.
All those in favor say aye.
Oh, second, yeah, sorry. I'll second it. Thank you.
Deliberately keeping it down there tonight.
I know, I thought you...
Make it easy on Jen, it's gonna be Jack. Deb.
Jack, Deb, everything, yeah.
Okay,
And you
everything.
can alternate to mix it up.
Yeah, okay.
Now keep it Jack, Deb, and then when I somehow miss it in the minutes, I'll know exactly what it was supposed to say.
There you go. Next one is 242, DP number 50 request to continue till September 28th.
Wait,
So
here's-
moved.
here comes Royal Quest.
What's that?
Oh,
Royal
nice.
Quest.
Wow.
That's Crested Butte.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That is,
Deb
that
to
is,
continue.
that is world class.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, good.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that's unanimous. Next one is 242-1629. Amendment. They're gonna build a bridge down there. Agreed. Looking up, oh no, it's still blurry.
Yeah, I don't know, this is strange. This has never been how it works, so.
Well, I think Phil has everything on the board anyway.
Yeah,
So.
I gotta hope. So, if you recall, the site, they demolished a portion of the building. That was the first amendment, I think, that came along. And then they didn't have a plan. They were just gonna leave it until they worked things out. They now have a plan, and I think we discussed at a prior meeting that we would allow them to file an amendment to say what would go in the place of the prior building. So what you're about to see will be entirely within the footprint of the prior building and the access drive. And with that, I'll turn it over
We're gonna
to.
wait for any of planning viewing this, and also Lisa Eggleston.
Yeah, so this is before Lisa Eggleston, and I think she was looking at it more with, I think because planning submitted it, she was looking toward their meeting next week and didn't have comments for tonight, but it still gives them the opportunity to put in front of us, planning to hear it, and then likely probably only need one more meeting to get it all tied up.
Okay, thank you.
I'm David Steinberg of RCG LLC. We represent the applicant. Phil Henry of Civil Design Group is here. He'll present the details that I think are most relevant for the commission. I think Jen introduced the main facts. We weren't sure if this was going to be a parking area or not. After we were constructing the first parking area, we wanted to see how that went and what demand was like around the rest of the site. We decided it was appropriate to expand the parking areas we were working on to further parking areas rather than putting a building back in that location. And we've engineered it really to work together with the other part of the site, but work independently as well for the review. So Phil can walk you through the basic aspects of the design.
So what we have before you tonight is what we're going to refer to as Phase 2, which is essentially this area back here. And I just want to refresh the memory of the commission from the prior submission. This was the approved plan that was before you, I guess, last year or 12 months ago. And this hatched area here is area identified as future development area. And so that's what we're seeking the amendment from the original order from, is to further develop and clarify what we intend and what we're proposing to do here. So what we're proposing to do is construct 108 parking spaces utilizing the existing access drive to the rear of the property, as well as modifying the current cross-access between what we consider Phase 1, the central parking lot, and Phase 2. And we're actually proposing to lose 4 previously proposed parking spaces as part of Phase 1 to cut in a cross-connection vehicular access drive from Phase 1 to Phase 2. So all in all, we have 108 parking spaces in Phase 2, and we're losing 6 parking spaces in Phase 1 for a net of 102 parking spaces. Back in July, mid-July, we had met with Ms. Hughes just preliminarily to discuss our intention as far as the proposed development. And at that hearing, we explained, or at that meeting, we explained that as far as the stormwater management, we intend to use the same design methodology as was incorporated in the central parking lot, or Phase 1, and that's the bioretention areas that they're using throughout the Phase 1 parking lot. So our phase 2 is managed through those same retention areas. There's an existing one as part of phase 1 that we're modifying, we're expanding, and that's pretty much taking this upper area here. And then we're introducing a new bioretention area in this grass area here, and that's managing the new lower parking lot of phase 2. Also, if you recall, as part of phase 1, there's proposed mitigation and restoration within the 25-foot no-touch proximate to Osgood Pond. What we're doing as part of phase 2, we're incorporating the same type of mitigation as referred to on your sheet 3 of the submittal. And I can actually go to those. This is a zoomed-in version of phase 2. What you see here in dark are the new plantings and shrubs within that 25-foot no-touch. All in all, we're adding 13 trees and over 70 shrubs and ground cover. And within the retention areas, we're adding 450 to 500 grass covers and different types of grass and ground covers within the bioretention area. As far as the overall stormwater management, the prior application considered all of this land draining into the stormwater basin, and then this basin has an existing drain that's outletting to Osgood Pond. And what we're proposing is to capture this in its own footprint, essentially, through those retention areas, and discharge it through an existing manhole that was recently installed as part of phase 1, and discharge it to Osgood Pond. So we're not altering the analysis points at all. So, and two other things to note. What you see here in gray hatch is a converted impervious area to landscape area, and that overall totals 8,000 square feet. And as part of our submission, we have broken that 8,000 square feet into 0 to 25, 25 to 50, and 50 to 100 relative to Osgood Pond, or the wetlands associated with Osgood Pond. And then the last item that I wanted to mention, there are 2 hatched areas in our proposal, and that represents existing area within the 0 to 25. So that's already existing, and we're maintaining that existing. However, we are reducing the impervious coverage from the previously approved phase 1 design by 300 square feet. So there was 300 square feet that was previously approved that we are now reducing as part of this development, because we're realigning this access drive. The previously approved access drive came in right here, and we're actually bumping it out a little bit to expand this bioretention area, thus allowing us to incorporate more landscape area proximate to the wetland.
So again, under review by Lisa for stormwater. And you've had initial discussions with her.
Yeah, we had met with Lisa just to review our design methodology, and we had a very pleasant conversation, or meeting in person, and we had sent everything to her attention for her review. So.
Okay, thank you. Any questions?
No questions at this
Jeff, any questions?
Yeah. Does the functioning of the bioretention areas that you talked about, does that rely on pervious pavement in those parking areas?
No, it is actually, it's all graded to drain via sheet flow into those retention areas. So for instance, let's just go to the grading plan. Bioretention area 9, we're just adding on to the previously nomenclature. Bioretention area 9 is this lineal retention area here. Upstream of that, directly upstream of that, is a lineal forebay that was previously approved in phase 1 and is most recently used in this bioretention area. It's essentially a concrete trench that allows water to run into it, settle, and then overflow. Yeah. This whole area right here has been designed to grade down via overland flow, and this is essentially a level edge, so the sheet flows in to that basin.
Okay.
This upper area here, sheet flows into an inlet, a curb inlet, and then goes into a separate set of the forebay, and then goes into that bioretention area. And this is the one that was previously approved, we just expanded upon.
Okay. Another question related to something you described earlier on stormwater management, that the original design intent was to utilize a detention basin on, I guess, the lower right-hand side of your sheet there, yeah. And now you're going to divert it, maybe I heard you wrong, but maybe directly to a manhole that is existing on Phase 1
Yeah.
that will discharge then directly out to Osgood Pond?
Yeah.
Don't you lose treatment under that, utilizing that methodology?
In our opinion, no, because the way this basin was either designed or constructed, there's no room for detention. We've recently drained this pond, and we found that there's actually nothing going into it. We believe that the existing rooftop from Building 37, which is now demolished, went into that. The issue is that the soil below did not allow any infiltration, such that when the water was full, it always stayed at the outlet pipe. So there's no room for detention, therefore there's no room for any solids to settle, so to speak. So from a hydrologic standpoint, we think that this has no functionality. So that's why we didn't really use it. Also, this basin, there's a berm here that prohibits us from sheet flowing via overland flow, which is one of the reasons why we had to utilize a bioretention area and redirect it, because as soon as we introduce a catch basin or inlet, that rim to invert is, say 3 feet, we'd be too low to discharge into this pond because the outlet pipe, for some reason, was elevated. So I don't know what the actual design intention was, and I think this pond was constructed in the early 90s when that addition was put on. But we have investigated that over the past few months, actually, and we cannot determine from a hydrologic standpoint the functionality of that pond.
Looks like some valuable real estate on your site, so.
I don't make that call.
Yeah, I know. No more questions.
I did have one question, well, too. Right now, that's existing pavement, that area?
No, right now, that area is, the foundation's been dug up, so it's essentially stockpiled right now. I'm waiting to see what happens. There's soil stockpiled there that we excavated from the other part of the site.
It's
and
just
some
dirt.
exposed.
Okay.
I had a couple photos of the site actually as it exists now.
So it's gonna be removal of the dirt?
Yep.
And then regrading and pave?
Yep.
We can talk about erosion controls later at some point. How much of a cut is there? I don't know if there's any elevations on here. Is it gonna be much of a cut? So we wanna make that the way you're gonna go?
Well, the grading is based on actually the existing doors that were once upon a time filled in to make room for the addition, and now now those doors are exposed and are exterior doors, and that elevation is 79.5. Excavating the foundation and then backfilling it so that for staging areas so that vehicles can drive over, it was around 81.5 or 82. So there's actually a removal of 2.5 feet of soil that is required. And on sheet 3, there's the erosion control. Essentially, the erosion control is in place, both single wattles and double wattles in certain locations as part of Phase 1, and as well as a chain link construction fence. We're proposing to essentially maintain that.
Yeah, all the EC is in good condition. They've been doing their monitoring. I was just out there for a conversation with Julie Von Drock, who monitors the site, about their planting plan and invasives removal. They're going to have to do some more invasives removal than they anticipated in order to do these plantings, but that's underway.
Yeah, like I said, when it becomes pre-construction, I'd like to see it anyways, because see where the dirt's going. Okay, I'm all set.
I'm going to kind of probably follow up on Jack's questioning, but I was thinking along the same lines as you were to begin with. I'm trying to recognize that this is really an evolving redevelopment project, and that in the overall sequencing, we always should be getting a net improvement on water quality and a net improvement on runoff. a peak attenuation, if you will, not so much treatment, but actually flood control, runoff control. And I just want to make certain we're not losing any handle on that as we move our way through. I'm visualizing what was previously a building, and the runoff went somewhere as an old condition, pre-existing condition, and that removal of that building obviously improved something, and now they're putting pavement back in place, which, whether that's an improvement or not, I guess the jury's still out until Lisa completes a review. Mentally, I'm trying to add it together, and I think it's still a net improvement.
So we had this discussion when we talked about should we allow them to do an amendment or make them file a new notice of intent for this portion of the project, because technically the use is intensified. If you think about now all cars coming there versus it being a building and it being clean runoff. But, you know, if they do exactly what they say they're going to do, which is treat all that runoff and abate the increase in flow, if there is an increase in flow, I don't know what the difference would be. Certainly there's an increase in stuff on the parking lot and sands and those sorts of things. But if they do and they've technically reduced the impervious, then I think, yes, that the answer is it could be a net benefit.
And that's why I'm trying to look at it that way, but I'm hoping that Lisa's evaluation before her review begins is kind of methodically netting that out in some sort of tabular form that has, and I don't know if this is the last phase or if there's, hopefully there's going to be other phases, I imagine there might be, or changes, you know, it's that type of property, I think. So I guess, I'm not going to say it's a leap of faith, but I've heard the proposal that, you know, collecting the runoff in this parking lot and putting it in by retention areas and then diverting it directly to the pond is what they're proposing. Whether it's good or not, I'm going to just wait until Lisa's review's done. I don't know that yet.
And I think you can just take the old pond out of it. I don't think the old pond had anything to do with treatment or, you know, if it took roof runoff, at least, you know, it didn't go anywhere because that pond was full all the time, and any time I've ever been to the site. So it was stagnant. I mean, I think we somewhat worried there were things living in it, but dewatering it, that you guys didn't find much of anything in there. So nothing penetrates. It's just, you know, mosquito breeding. There was nothing. There's nothing growing in it either, really, along the edge, somewhat. But
I'm not sure what value there is in even, just as you guys suggested, any value in even evaluating what the prior pond's use was. If you're looking at what was building area that went somewhere, figure out where it went, and then look at the, you know, the new grading configuration, that water is either going in the same direction, the same outlet point, and if it is, then it's modeled accurately. If it isn't, then it's modeled in a way that may be not reflecting to what the pre-existing condition was. So, you know, Lisa picks up that stuff. She's very good. But I'm not convinced one way or the other whether there's, you know, this is a net improvement. Visually, I think it is. That's all I can say. I'll hold my comments till Lisa gets back to us.
I have no questions at this time. John?
Yeah, just a very minor point that I forgot to cover in my first questions. The cooling tower that's right in the middle of the view, the letter said it's going to be replaced with a smaller one. Can you show us approximately where the current one is and where the new one will be?
the upper right-hand corner of.
Is that it, that structure on the upper left corner?
Yeah.
I think it's probably better on the whole site map there, yeah.
So the existing cooling tower is right here, and we're proposing to relocate it to right here.
To there, okay.
And it'll
it's-
be on existing pavement.
It'll be on,
On a new pad.
On
What was proposed as existing.
yeah.
Yes.
And it'll actually be moved, it's currently in, actually I think it even touches into the 25-foot
Yeah.
buffer, and it'll be moved out beyond the 50-foot
Yep.
buffer in its new location. So it'll be quieter, it'll be slightly smaller.
I think there were some trees proposed there, and we were on site with the landscape person, and he said he could relocate them
We're gonna
kind
relocate
of
the
closer to
trees.
the buffer, where I think you're going to lose a tree, a bittersweet covered black walnut that's in the corner where the new cooling tower needs to go. And he said he would put some of the landscape trees are already in, if you look at the photos, a lot of them. So he said he would be able to put some trees in that area too, which is also all knotweed.
I'm all set.
I have a follow-up question as well as I was thinking. So I'm assuming that when Lisa conducts her review, she's looking at it from a year-round perspective, and, you know, do we defeat any functionality of these bioretention areas when they're on edges of parking lots where snow storage is likely to be occurring right in that location when the lot is plowed? I mean, are there precautions they need to make to not affect runoff peak attenuation as well as treatment, in the wintertime?
Well, on the site plan, we have designated areas for snow storage, and they're not in the bioretention area. They're along the edges here and along the edges here. It's a catch-22, right? Because you want to get the snow off the area, but when it melts, you actually want it to go through the treatment train. So we think we've accomplished that because this is graded towards the pavement, and so is this. So we wrestle with that on every application, but you're right. We don't want to fill the retention area, thereby filling the volume capacity, so that when snow melts occurs, you're maximizing that area. So.
And I think we already had no snow stockpiling signs conditioned along the 25.
Along the outside, yeah.
Right, but and I think as this conversation continues, that that's one of the things I'm going to be looking for in this area, dividing the upper and lower lots.
They have their O&M plan does talk about snow stockpiling as well. They only get the copy of the packet electronically, so they don't necessarily see everything in the beginning. But I'll make sure I get that out to you.
And we've actually revised the previously approved operation and maintenance plan. We didn't submit as part of the application to follow suit with the prior application, just to make sure all the BMPs, the retention areas, are, once they're finalized and approved by Lisa. However, we did go ahead and just prepare it in anticipation that she would agree with our approach. So that is final, and then we can submit that once, subsequent to her review.
Sorry, there was one in there. It must be the old one then.
It's the old one.
Okay.
I actually have a new one, but I was waiting to submit it just until Lisa reviewed it.
Actually, that's a good point, because I was just going to raise, Jennifer, is, from a housekeeping perspective, it may not be premature, but how do we envision the record keeping on this amendment? Where there are an overall site proposal that's now going to change, and this is not trying to compare it to Merrimack condos, but in the end, you're going to have some final result that becomes the record.
We reissue the order of conditions to include these new plan sets as part of the record.
But they're supplementing, not substituting. All the old records.
Yeah, this one doesn't substitute because it uses what was just an empty building footprint. So it's kind of like a continuation of the plan set.
Supplements, okay.
And our new operation and maintenance plan adopted the old format, so it encapsulates all the previously approved BMPs into our new operation and maintenance plan. So therefore, we can just submit the new one, and that could be the...
And they'll record that with the order. We always conclude that with the order, so it gets recorded together. So the O&M plan will be comprehensive. That'll be good.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we need to continue?
Yeah, planning meets next Tuesday, and I'm sure Lisa will have a review for them then, so we should be good for 2 weeks on the 28th.
Okay, is that good for you?
Yep.
Move to continue to the next,
28th.
the 28th.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that's unanimous. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And here we have Merrimack condominiums.
Yes, we do. Sure we do.
This is just a written submission? Or?
Well, the plan set looks very much like the plan set that you saw at the meeting for when we did the enforcement order. I told them not to come because they basically presented everything at the last meeting. So we told them that in order to move forward, they needed to submit their formal modifications and 4 checks for the 4 different things they needed modified, which they did. Those include, you can see them listed in this letter here. the stairs and walkways, technically. The stormwater management structure, those flared end pieces, one of them they were going to pull back, but one of them they were going to leave in a location that was not previously approved. They deleted a retaining wall behind Building H, which resulted in further grading out into the 25-foot no disturb zone, or the no disturb zone, since there isn't a 25 particularly on this site. And that all of these things resulted in them having to do further replication in an area that they disturbed but didn't mean to, and then subsequently didn't build large enough, and then create a new replication area where they changed a stormwater outfall and accidentally altered an area of wetland, and then plant a mitigation area where they, instead of a retaining wall, did additional grading. So if that doesn't sound great, it does, but in the end, the project's always been, unfortunately, right up against the wetland. So they've altered things that were either right up against or in the wetland, and I would say overall there should be no net loss. There'll probably be a net gain in actual wetland. They did have some problems replicating in the first area that they started, but they'll be starting over, new soils, new plants. They'll be doing additional monumentation. So, I mean, this was all what they brought before you last time. So it's just formally putting it into writing and, incorporating that plan set into the order of conditions as a modification.
Any questions, Deb?
No question.
Scott?
Did they get everything? I mean, Jen, did they check off all the boxes from our last hearing?
Yes.
As far as, I think I think one thing you didn't mention is they moved back 2 flared ends.
That's the stormwater pieces. So those are the outlets that one of them will remain in an area that was not previously approved, and one of them they're actually going to pull it back to where it was proposed. But they've still altered wetland while putting it where it didn't belong. So one will eventually conform to what was proposed, but one will not.
Yeah.
And Lisa did review those and say that it was okay.
So,
Joe?
So I remember we tripped them up on procedure, on not submitting the documents and lack of clarity and the difficulty of us doing the overlay. So that's what we tripped them up on. I don't think we ever concluded whether we were going to accept any of the requests or not. I think generally we understood them, but I'm still kind of concerned where they eliminated a retaining wall, which resulted in the toe of the slope getting further out. Why would we consider such a thing?
Well, we asked them, and I mean, I have the grading here. I don't think putting in the retaining wall gets us anything. So if they were to go in now and put in and construct the retaining wall behind a building that's already constructed, they'd still have to replicate that buffer zone that they've already altered. All we're saying now is you have a buffer zone, you just need to replant it. But you're right, you did ask in that last hearing that you wanted to make sure that the grading would work. I have to disconnect and reconnect here for whatever reason.
The only reason why it was flawed is because Lisa said, based on what you've seen, it didn't affect the stormwater. That's the only reason why because I wanted I wasn't wanting to approve any of the modifications.
So
the wall where it is, it was going to be.
What I don't want to do is open up season on other applicants, other contractors to begin to think that what I think I'm doing is reasonable, and by the way, a modification after the fact might be all I need. That's just going to create anarchy, and you guys it'll be a mess.
right.
We've been pretty firm on holding people to the requirement, and if they come in and ask for something ahead of time because of a technicality or difficulty in construction, and we think about it logically, we understand it and understand the engineering, we're inclined to consider it and probably even approve it. But what I don't want this to look like is that this project's a great example of it, is that you can almost do what you want and come in after the fact and say, oops, what do you think now?
Exactly what they did here.
Well, I know, and that's, I'm a little uncomfortable. And I understand the circumstances here, and I understand that it may be okay in the end, and it may work generally in accordance with the intent from the beginning. But boy, there are other developers back in the day that have, the word ever got out that this is what it is, this is the way we do business now, we'd be in a bad way.
Right. Well, I mean, we made it somewhat punitive that they had to pay, to modify each and every thing they altered differently. I guess.
I'm not putting you on the spot, I'm just concerned about the precedent.
The way we sort of thought through this, one of the things is it took us we noticed the first wetland alteration immediately. And, we said, you weren't supposed to have dug this up. Like, this shouldn't be disturbed. This was wetland. And so they modified that last fall, I think. Maybe almost a year ago now, they planted that replication area. And we caught right on to that. I think because this project, and again, this is the result of the 40B process, is they developed right up to the edge of the wetland. And we have been so hyper-focused on them putting those structures in the right place, that every time a structure went in, we went out, we taped it off, we blah, 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 that, the finer things that were happening weren't as noticeable. So we want to say behind H, the fact that there was no retaining wall there probably went 6 months before we were like, they put on the stairs, and we're like, those stairs were supposed to be on the side of the building. Why are they on the back? And then we looked at the plan and we're like, they couldn't have even been on the back. They would have emptied out onto the retaining wall. Oh wait, there's no retaining wall. It's just, we're in the 25 to begin with. I think Tim thought he was doing a good thing because he wasn't building a wall, he was grading gently down to the wetland.
Well, he felt that, from what I heard him say, it was easier to grade it than it was to build a wall. And then they modified the design of the buildings so that the stairs that were originally shown on the plans were altered.
Right.
And they wanted to head and just alter them.
But they put the footprints in the right place, so they thought they were fine.
A couple of things that you said, Jim, I just want to be clear for anybody who may still be watching us at home, is is not that you may not be a big fan of 40Bs, or you may be a big fan of them. This particular project took 40B to the limit.
Right.
We have a lot of very successful 40Bs in town here that work very closely with this commission. And in the end, we've gotten pretty good results by working with those developers and working in the planning stage and in the permitting stage and then throughout construction to make things work. So when you say 40B, this is the worst example of what you get out of it. Honestly.
But the truth is, you just looked at Empire Drive tonight, wetland crossing, deck in the 50. Like, they get more, and they, I'm not a fan because they get
the question is, the
exemptions.
40B are only subject to the State Wetlands Act.
And to the wetlands bylaw, to the extent that the zoning board of appeals makes them subject. It's a process that's not worth discussing
If they do, you got to go through the board.
So I just want to be clear that
But most of
this
our
isn't
problems-
casting any criticism to other 40Bs in town. I mean, this has got its own problems.
Right, but I guess it's because it's so close to the wetland that these kinds of things are happening. Like, on I can show you an example later tonight. I have to talk to you
And we
about.
all saw them from the beginning, that this was
If
likely
you
to
put the
happen.
deck stairs in the wrong place on a house that's 75 feet from the wetland, it's not an issue. You put the deck stairs in the wrong place on a house that's 12 feet from the wetlands, it's an issue. So
If it wasn't for the staff going out there constantly, this would have been a disaster.
It already is a disaster.
Well, it still is, but it's a lot better than what it could have been. Heidi picked up a foundation that was off 40 feet.
before it was put in the ground.
Before it was put in the ground.
And then remember we had the big survey area where there was more
They had
land
two
than they thought.
benchmarks and they didn't line up. The buildings that we're talking about now probably would have been on 114 the way they were going.
So the caution is, first of all, the clarification from the last meeting was, on procedures, tell us what you're looking for, give us a plan. They've done that. I just want to make certain that we're looking at it site-specific on very unique circumstances that cannot be setting precedent for anything else.
Because we don't have anything this close to the wetland anywhere
There
else.
is not open season. Any violator is going to be dealt with sternly if they're in violation of the order of conditions. If they're into the no disturb or they're into the no cut area, which is the same, no build of the no disturb area, there are going to be repercussions. And these people got some repercussions.
Right.
Yeah.
They're going to have to monitor these areas for another 2 years. Plants and soils, and
they pay triple fees on all four of those.
They don't pay triple on modifications because it's a money. It's just the way the bylaws were written. But anyway, they did pay punitive fees, and they are going to be doing wetland replication and monitoring for 2 more years on all of these areas. That's also part of
I will
the...
dismount my high horse. I think I got my point across.
Well, you were right in asking that. You did want to see, this plan does show the grading.
Great peril.
You did ask to see that the grading would work prior to the last meeting. So this plan does, the last time you saw
Suggests it
this,
does,
it didn't
yeah.
have the grading.
Right.
But now it has the grading.
A lot of it came together last meeting, because, I mean, frankly, it's pretty clear the project was somewhat out of control. Things were being done. And Jen and Heidi were noticing after the fact, some of these subtleties. And until last meeting, they were denying outright that they did any wetland modification at all, whereas they came in with a plan that says, we modified this wetland. So, the net result of last meeting was, everything was either corrected or mitigated, through the revised plan and what this modification request is comprised of. So that's really how it ended up.
Not a good situation.
No, it's not a good situation.
I
Some of
think
these
that-
buildings, the rear exits from these buildings, they don't leave any room for movement or anything. You gotta go around the Robin Hood's barn to get out from behind each one.
And then we've got a fence and some vegetation protecting.
The fence is right up against the
It's right up against the yard.
stairwell.
Yeah, there's like 1 foot, 2 foot between the two.
I don't have
Those
to.
bushes are right over there.
Yeah, it's a little better than it looks there.
All right, well, that being said, if there aren't any more questions, we'll take a motion for the modification request.
I move that we approve the modification request as proposed.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
One opposition.
Okay.
Next one is 2.2/14/19 COC request for 70 Glenwood Road.
70 Agunquit. Keep getting better. Oh, we're back to, that looks like Merrimack condos again.
And I thought that was...
That was Merrimack, yeah.
Please try Barrow.
Huh?
Please try Barrow.
So 70 Agunquit. If you look at Heidi's review there, was largely outside the buffer zone. The front of the yard and the driveway were in the buffer zone or in riverfront, maybe a little bit of both. The erosion controls have been removed. The driveway is somewhat reconfigured, but again, is quite a distance from the wetland, outside the 50 and outside of riverfront. There is riverfront on the lot that was supposed to be monumented. When Heidi went out, there were just very small stakes in the ground with our markers on them that would not be permanent in the long run, maybe for a certain amount of time. But so she was, and the owners are here, and they wanted to talk to you briefly because I think there's a lot of ledge out there and digging posts into the ground. That's an example of what we have on another site on Salem Street, just stones monumenting the, and mind you, this isn't monumenting the 25-foot no disturb. On this order, which was permitted before I got here, you permitted, they needed to monument the riverfront area. So these stones would monument the riverfront area, and there are proposed to be 4 of them. So would the stones something that's agreeable, or did you want to try to dig
I'd have to
posts?
bring some equipment in.
Are you Mr. McKay?
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm not the owner.
He's the developer, yes.
No.
No?
Just built the house.
Built the house.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it needs to be one or the other, according to the
So
commission.
those cedar stakes aren't acceptable.
No, because they're not permanent.
And the only alternative would be 4 stones.
Well, or you could figure out a way
Permanent.
to
Put the stakes in
put
permanently.
permanent posts in.
You can't get a 4x4 post. solid rock. There's about maybe 8 inches of soil. That's not going to support a 4x4 post.
The rocks are
So
probably
we weren't looking for a physical barrier, we were looking just for a
Monumentation.
monumentation for the, so rocks,
mark the 200.
just mark a limit, doesn't have
Why are we
any.
marking the 200-foot?
This was permitted before I got here. You guys did this across the site. So largely the 200-foot riverfront area, because this is,
Mosquito Brook,
no,
low end,
not Fishbrook, Rocky Brook.
Rocky Brook, low end.
So you had all across the site, on all of the lots, the riverfront area is marked with markers. So this is just a continuation of that marking.
I wish we had a better plan to see, 'cause
So the posts run, so if you look up from G, you can kind of see there's a line.
Yeah.
There's actually some wording in a line that goes to it.
yes.
And going north, if north is to the top of the plan, there are 4 markers. One at the road, at the edge of the road, and then the one that has the line and the wording, and then 2 more above it are the ones that were shown on the plan.
And that whole line is all ledge?
That a whole lot is. It's bad.
A lot of rock out there.
Rocky Brook, you think you'd see it coming?
I know.
So what's the total length of the line we're talking about?
120 feet, maybe?
Yep.
It's 4 markers every 30 feet, so that's sort of supposable.
So what I'm wrestling with is, when we've done physical barriers, we've substituted rocks for fences sometimes on a rare occasion, or even short of a full wall. But we're not, all we're doing is looking to notice people that out beyond this area. So even a rock doesn't do that unless you have a plaque on the rock.
No, they have markers on it. The epoxied markers would go on the stones.
Would go on the stones?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, then I'm okay with that. As long as they're big enough that,
You can't pick them up and move them, so.
Hey, don't laugh. We had to define what a rock wall meant.
We've had some rock wall
Because we went on a
discussions.
site walk and the kids were picking up the wall piece by piece, throwing them at the frogs.
And I'll put them in the same location as the markers.
Right.
Sure.
And I'm going to get the rocks.
Okay.
I'll probably just have to find them on the side or something.
There's got to be stones out there somewhere.
And the plaques will be the same plaques that are on the markers?
Yeah,
now?
oh yeah,
Just
epoxy on
Just a
them.
parking lot, yeah.
Okay.
All right,
Thank you, I'm all set.
any questions? More
No questions.
Motion?
So we'll issue the COC and hold it until the stones and markers are in place?
Sure.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous. All set. Thank you. Next one is 242-1405, 655 South Bradford.
So this is an invalid order of conditions. Are you here for 655? Are you the current owner or? So it's. Okay. Because there was an order of conditions issued to someone, but it wasn't technically issued to you. You're now the subsequent owner who's selling again, right? Is that the?
Correct.
Okay. Just want to make sure.
We've lived there 8 years.
Okay, South Bradford. Actually, I don't think we have any photos of South Bradford because the work was never done. So, oh, here's the photo. Heidi did go out there. Be interesting to see how this is gonna, actually, that's not too bad. Maybe I'll just leave it at that scale. The order was to clear the trees behind the shed up to the 25-foot no disturb, put in a wall, and expand the yard, basically. But you can see the trees were never cut. It does appear, whether it was you or the prior owner, that might have done some understory clearing. It's hard to say. Heidi didn't think, though, that the intent of the order had been met because all the trees were there. So,
But not a violation either.
she didn't think so.
Yeah.
So she just said,
Housekeeping.
it should be made clear to the new owner who will, be getting the property going forward, that just because this was out there and they can't do any work back there. Currently, there's, closing this out will mean that nothing can be done beyond the previous limit of clearing. So.
So we have an order that was never executed, so if we do a certificate of compliance as an invalid order,
Yeah.
if we do it as an invalid order, none of the prior conditions hold in
Right.
perpetuity. So how do we get notice out to the new owner?
Well, they've been in contact with us,
But there's no document out there.
Well, they were asking
Just
to
a-
do it.
if they could do it. So we're just going to make it clear that the invalid order means none of the work. Whether some work was done or not done, it can't,
So they have to
nothing can be
refile.
done.
Right.
If they want to,
If
whatever
they
they...
wanted to.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
And doesn't the COC also include like a box to check that the work was never
Correct.
Yeah.
started? Yeah.
Any questions? Jack? Joe?
I'm all set.
Doug? Motion.
Move that we grant a certificate of compliance for 242-1405.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that's unanimous. All set. And last but not least, 0 Riverview Street.
So you have a copy of this in your, there's been an update to Zero Riverview too, which they sent me an end of day email.
This is the one we reviewed a couple weeks ago, a couple meetings ago.
But they want to use them on these.
So they want an easement on the easement. If you recall, I last minute printed something they sent me and I
Is
don't
this the
know.
one you wrote or the one they wrote?
That's what they wrote, with one change that I offered. So if you recall, the easement was, I mean, we did an RDA to allow these 2 additional poles to be placed on the site.
Mhm.
I don't know why, this doesn't update. When I open it, it looks exactly as it did, but you can see the pink pole down the bottom.
Yeah.
GLSD already holds an easement over that, that area. So this would sit over that easement.
I thought it was 2 poles, it's 4.
No, there will be 4 out there, 2 brand new,
2, but there's 2 existing now.
2 existing.
What the
Oh,
hell?
what did I do with?
Why are we a party to any easement?
Well, you own this land. This is care, custody, and control of the commission, Riverview
Thank you.
Street. Sorry.
Didn't know that. So GLSD has an easement from us.
Right.
Okay, I'm sorry, I thought they had it from some other party.
No. No.
I've never heard of an easement over an easement before.
Well, I did sort of question that, but they didn't get back to me on.
I don't know why you'd want them.
So the owner could issue rights, an easement if you will, rights to land for a particular purpose to a party.
Yeah.
And now another, so then let's say that party is, what else am I gonna just answer
Here's
this with a-
I'll let you read this because this is what I got end of day and I didn't read it, so you'll be the first. Because Lou had some questions about their ability to add to the area. Excavate and add to were the words they use.
Well, let me just go with where I was going, because, I've done a lot of easement work. So an owner extends the right to a party to be on their property, and all they're doing is giving them rights, easement rights, let's say, to put a utility in. And let's say that's a water pipe. And then along comes the power company who wants to also, in that same general corridor, put in an underground power line, or even an overhead power line with posts. The landowner could still grant an easement to them, but the party that has the easement to begin with has to be willing to understand that it's not compromising any of the rights that we previously granted. So it's perfectly legit to have multiple easements.
Okay.
The question is if we already have an easement with the GLSD, am I correct?
For their other 2 poles.
Mass Electric.
No, GLSD.
GLSD. All right, for GLSD. And now the electric company wants to occupy that same easement. Does GLSD have any issue with that?
Well, those 2 new poles are to put the metering equipment from GLSD.
That's what
on
I
them.
seem to remember. That's what I thought. So we don't think they're going to have a problem, but they have rights.
They know. They fully know. They don't really understand why the power company needs additional easements, but they didn't have any concerns. They know this is happening. I talked to Richard
That's-
Weir.
Okay, and again, I think now we're getting into legalese. I think there needs to be some sort of,
Goes to the extent of,
I think it needs to be some sort of counter signature. We're going to grant it to the grid, and in the same time, GLSD is surrendering some of their, or maybe sharing some of their easement rights with grid.
So don't they have to agree to it?
I think they do.
Yeah. And I would think it would.
I think it's allowed, but I think they have to agree to it.
Yeah.
Is their signature not on the easement that
I
we
didn't
got?
see it when we flipped through it. It seems to be just Louis. That's why I asked, why do we have a
Well, I think the
dog in
Board
this
of
fight?
Selectmen, I thought, were on here too, or they were supposed to be, I thought.
Yeah, it's just, well,
Okay.
Do we just, I mean, the general issue is, we're not taking exception to what they're asking for. Can we just have council develop the, I think there needs to be.
I don't think, well,
Okay.
in talking with at least my boss, that we don't want, I mean, we don't want to be paying council to do something for this on our part. We're not getting anything out of this. Why should we be paying council to draft an easement?
So let me say it differently. I'm not so sure Louis has the authority to sign this. I think we have care and custody, but I think the selectmen ultimately
You
have.
granted easements on Bruin Hill when
Yeah,
you
Well, I mean, I think what you stepped on before, GLSD should.
At the very least, they have to countersign. They have to
Right.
agree to it.
Right.
In writing.
Because we're granting stuff, an
Well, in
easement
fact,
on somebody else that we've already given an easement
I
to.
don't think they're going to argue. I think they're going to do it readily. They
already
just-
given them permission to put those poles on your property.
Right.
They're already done, they put the poles up. So now they want to legalize things and have an easement so that they can officially be on it. And, you know, so we've already let the cat out of the bag, so to speak, and by allowing them to do it. So if you want to do this correctly, you say, well, we want it reviewed by town council to make sure everything's right, and let the electric company, National Grid, pay for it. Because those two additional poles were put in at the request of National Grid.
But to serve.
On behalf of the GLSD.
GLSD.
Yeah, I don't think it's an issue. I think it's just a matter of documentation.
Let either the Lawrence Sanitary District pay for it or the National Grid pay for it. Probably the Sanitary District pay for it.
Or just have National Grid come up with a document with GLSD that they're in agreement on the easement. And then we can approve this.
But do you like the language of the easement? Because you had issues with the language of the easement when
Yeah,
I talked to you
the
last.
part about
I want
the
to see what Grid said.
excavation.
I also asked Grid to be here, and they said no. So their email is,
What says this?
it says, we are not going to negotiate our rights to add to, as this refers to the appurtenances to the structures shown on the easement sketch, such as anchored guys, insulation, etc., which may from time to time have to be added, replaced in order to continue safe power supply. If we ever had need to consider additional structures for whatever now unforeseeable reasons, that would require an amendment to the easement along with whatever permits might be required under conservation restrictions. So if you need written statements as to real estate law, that will need to be provided by your own legal counsel or requested from GLSD since they are customer being served. As for the meeting, my manager and legal counselor suggested that the invitation be extended to GLSD and their counsel to discuss any legal concerns you might have associated with the easement. So that was their response.
My thing is if they go to do an improvement on that's not allow them to be exempt. You know, like I said, if they increase the wires for whatever reason, or use the poles for the other reason, other than what it's originally designed for, in that it's only supposed to supply GLSD. Now, I know that's Al's thing. Anytime you do an increase, does not come under the maintenance exemption that they have.
Yeah, I guess my thought is maybe a little bit more general than that, and that is that if this is a drafted easement by National Grid that they're proposing to us, and generally when somebody drafts something, they draft it in their favor.
Right.
And so, you know, I think if they want the easement, they should probably pay for our town council.
Well, they're
for
saying
review.
GLSD really is the one who needs the easement, but then why is GLSD's easement not enough? Like, that's what GLSD's probably gonna say, well, we have an
What
easement.
is their easement?
Theirs is to do whatever is necessary to operate the sewer. That's when you read their
Yeah, but
easement.
is there any lines to find their easement on the site?
Yeah, that what you see on the
They
plan,
have the whole
right-
site.
no, what you see on the plan right there, that square box is their
That's
easement.
their box, and
Yep.
that's all that,
It's all on the town land.
it's on the town land, but if this is what the electric light wants,
Wants the same easement.
same thing, okay? So if they've already got it, so we already granted an easement to Lawrence, you work for Lawrence Sanitary District.
Well, they want the easement for $1. They want to have discretion to do those
Do
activities.
whatever they want to do within their easement.
Right.
Within their own opinion and judgment. And it says on the
Which means
second
You're not
page
going to see
that,
them again.
that they can't, that it can't be changed unless they say it can be changed, and it can be withheld, and the permission to change could be withheld at their sole discretion.
Right.
So it sounds like it's written in their favor quite a bit, and that may be common for easements. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know really anything about them, but it just seems like it's written in their favor, and we should have some legal, rebuttal.
Yeah, but I, that's fine. I don't think the town or the commission should have to flip the dime
I
for the
agree.
legal documentation of an easement that's already there.
Well, this is for the benefit of the Lawrence Sanitary District. Let them,
Then the
Yeah,
Lawrence
let them do it.
Sanitation District should pay for the
no,
legal.
let them pay, let either National Grid or the Lawrence Sanitary District pay for our council.
Our council.
I will tell both parties that the town wants this reviewed by their council at the expense of either Grid or GLSD, and
Yeah,
that
we don't
needs
care
to be
who
worked
pays
out
for
by
it, as
them.
long as somebody
Okay.
writes the check.
Okay, I will further the matter that way then.
All right, so we need a motion to continue.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, that's unanimous. And we need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, that's unanimous.